Okay, we are on Mem Dalid. Mem Dalid. Yeah, Mem Dalid Amud Aleph 44a1. So we had this case. Where this student, Nehemiah, the son of Rav Chanilai, was engrossed in his learning, and he's walking around, and so engrossed in his learning, he ends up going beyond the lines of the Tchum, and now he's stuck. And so we had two Amorav. So ultimately, Rav Nachman came and said, what you should do is get a group of people to kind of stand around him and make partitions. And once they make these partitions, now he's in a partition space. And we saw earlier, we had this psak of Rabbi Gamliel, who said that once you're in a partition place, once you're in a surrounded place, you're allowed to walk through that whole area. And once he's in that partition space, allow him to make the partitions from where he is beyond the tchum back into the tchum. Okay, back into the tchum, and then he'd be able to walk into the tchum. Right? You're all good with how that works? So fine. So now, the Gemara wanted to know why... who is it? That Rav Chisda, why was Rav Chisda even asking the question? Why did Rav Chisda come up with this on his own? And the question is, what was Rav Chisda troubled by? So the Gemara says, was he troubled? The Gemara has two possibilities. Either one, he was troubled by the ruling of Rav Gamliel, do we actually paskin like Rav Gamliel? And meaning Rav Gamliel, who says you're allowed to walk through an entire partition. Because remember, Rabbi Kiva said that even when you're in a partition beyond the tchum, how much are you allowed to walk? Just 4 amos, right? So the Gemara is questioning, is it that he wasn't sure if he passed like Rav Gamliel, or is he not sure about the following? And that is that until now we assumed, when it was presented, that the people made this partition all the way back into the tchum, right? But maybe, the Gemara now is proposing the possibility that maybe they made the partition, but it didn't go all the way back into the tchum. The partition went just close to the tchum, 2 amos away. And as we'll see in a Mishnah in a little bit, there is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, who holds that you have an extra 2 amos to go beyond the tchum. And so maybe maybe there weren't enough people, and therefore it was next to the tchum. It was next to bringing back to the tchum, but it was 2 amos away. And the question was, do we rule like Rabbi Eliezer, who allows a person to go within 2 amos of the tchum? Okay, so that's what we're trying to figure out. What was Rav Chisda, when Rav Chisda wasn't sure if you could do this, what was it that he was unsure about? Again, was he unsure about the halacha being like Rabbi Gamliel, or was he unsure about this halacha of Rabbi Eliezer, they have an extra 2 amos? Got it? Okay, so the Gemara says, Pshita, we're at 44a1, second paragraph, Pshita b'delo malu gavri askin. And it's obvious that we're discussing a case where there weren't enough people to form this enclosure going all the way back into the tchum. Why? Because if we're talking about a case where they had enough people to form the enclosure, ma'iti baile, what's the question? Ha'amar Rav halacha Gamliel, b'dir v'sar v'svina. We said explicitly, Rav Paskin, that the halacha follows Rav Gamliel. So clearly there's no uncertainty about the fact that if there was a partition all the way through, 100% there would be no question about the fact that he could walk all the way around in this partition. The only question was, and we're talking about where there weren't enough people to make this human chain or human wall from where Rav Nehemiah was stuck all the way back into the tchum. And Rav Chisda was unsure if we follow the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, yeah, makes sense? So Gemara says, Daikanami, Rava points out that this could actually be proven from the text of the dialogue, Dikamarle Yikanes, because Rav Nachman said, make the human partition and then let him enter. What does it mean? Ma'ikanis. What does it mean, let him enter? Lab lo mechitza. It would seem to be implying, let him enter, meaning that he's outside of something right now. In other words, if there was a human partition, you wouldn't say let him enter, just say keep on walking. Let him enter implies like he's leaving one space, one domain into another, and that would seem to be more appropriate for a case where, again, there weren't enough people, there's that gap, so let him enter, let him go into that space, and then he's allowed to go into the tchum. Okay, so that's one proof. That's a proof. Okay, now the Gemara asks a question about the notion that we set up. Now that means what's happening over here is that on Shabbos, Nehemiah was stuck, and they're setting up a partition. They're setting up a wall on Shabbos. The Gemara is going to question: are you allowed to set up a wall on Shabbos? Okay, this comes up with a lot of different halachos, right? Let's say you have, I don't know, let's say you want to daven somewhere and you want to set up a mechitza on Shabbos, right? Can you set up a partition, even if it's temporary? Let's say you have your door falls off on Shabbos. You can't replace your door on Shabbos. Can you place a curtain on the door for Shabbos, right? Are you allowed to do these things? You're allowed to place a temporary wall on Shabbos. Now the Gemara just assumed that, again, you have all these human beings making a partition. Now, we don't normally think of people as a partition, but that's effectively what they're doing. They're making a partition. Are you allowed to set up a temporary partition on Shabbos? That's what the Gemara is going to grapple with. So, Eitzvi Rav Nachman Yitzchak Rava. Rav Nachman Yitzchak asks Rava from the following brisa: Nafal dofna, if the wall of a sukkah falls on Yom Tov, lo yamid ba adam behema v'chelim. You're not allowed to place a person animal or utensil to stand in its place as the wall. Nor let it put up the bed, to spread a sheet over it. So basically, like the beds oftentimes had like a pole, had a pole on top of it, so you could spread. If a person had the bed at the edge of the sukkah, maybe you want to put a sheet on it to create it as a fourth, to create it as a wall of the sukkah. You're not allowed to make a temporary structure on Yom Tov and Shabbos, and certainly not on Shabbos. Okay, so you have this Bryce over here, which is questioning what we just did, because here in this sukkah, we said you're not allowed to use a human being. Now, a human being is clearly a temporary, he's not going to stay there for the rest of his life. It's a temporary structure. We're saying you can't go ahead and place human beings as a temporary structure, and yet, Rav Nachman just told us that the way to get Nehemiah back into the Tchum was using human beings as a temporary wall. How does it work? What are you allowed to do? So Amar Rava responds, At Amar Miha, you're questioning me from this brisa you just quoted. Vana mina lachmeha. I'm going to quote to you another brisa which seems to support me, because what does the brisa say in Masechah Sukkah? Osa adam es chavero dofen. A person's allowed to use his friend as a wall of a sukkah, kidei sheyochal v'yishtav v'yishan, so that a person's allowed to eat, drink, and sleep in it. V'yizkov v'samita v'yivsala sadan, and you're allowed to put up a bed at the edge of the sukkah and spread a sheet over it. Kidei shlotipal chama ala meis v'ala ochlin, so that sunlight will not fall on a corpse. Let's say there was a corpse there, and you don't want it to get decayed in the sun, or there's food there, you don't want it to spoil. But the bottom line is, yes, you asked me a very good question from a brisa which said you can't use a human being or any temporary structure as a wall, but I have a brisa which contradicts that. So now we have to obviously reconcile these two brisas. But don't ask me from brisa 1. You also have brisa which questions my position. Brisa number 2 supports my position. So Gemara says kashana adadi. We're on the bottom of 44a1. The brisas contradict each other. Gemara says lo kasha. There's no contradiction. Har Rav Eliezer, the brisa which prohibits placing a bed or a person as a temporary structure, follows the opinion of Rav Eliezer. Harabanan, and the other one, the one that permits it, follows the opinion of the Rabbanan. Which Rav Eliezer, which Rabbanan? So Gemara says, Ditznan was taught in the Mishnah. Pikakachalon. Okay, we have this case many times in Masechah Shabbos. A window shutter, right? Back in the day, there would be no glass over there often. There would just be a hole, and they would have this like board that they would use to cover it. That's how they would close a window, right? And so you have a window shutter. Rav Eliezer, if the window shutter is fastened to the wall by a rope, and the rope is short enough that the shutter, the little board, does not reach the floor. Okay, so that means it's already there. Then poking a bow, you're allowed to use it on Shabbos. Vim lav, but let's say it is not attached, or even it's attached but it's dragging on the floor, then it's seen as like you're actually building something temporary on Shabbos. Ain poking and bow, you would not be allowed to shutter with it on Shabbos. Okay, it's a form of building, right? Even though it's there, even though this window shutter doesn't stay forever. In other words, everyone agrees on Shabbos you can't place a brick down on a structure. If you're in the middle of building something, you can't place a brick that's building. But is this considered building? One could argue it's temporary, and therefore one may think it's not a problem. Rabbi Eliezer says no, unless it's like hanging and therefore seen as like part of the wall already. But if it's already on the floor, if the rope is long enough, it's on the floor, and now you're putting in the window, even though it's temporary, that is forbidden. V'chachamim omrim benkach uvenkach poking a bow. They hold that since it's temporary, it's an addition. It's something which was something there already before. You're just adding it back, placing it back on. Therefore, it is permitted. So what the Gemara wants to assume right now, to address these contradictory brisas, is to say that the brisa which permitted using a person as a wall because it's temporary, that goes like the chachamim who say you're allowed to place a window shutter because it's temporary, and the brisa which forbade using a human being and all these other things as a wall is going like the opinion of Rav Eliezer, who does not allow you to place this temporary structure in the wall. That's what the Gemara tries to say, but the Gemara rejects this. The Gemara says, there was a statement said about this dispute between Rav Eliezer and the Chachamim. Amar Rabba bar Rachan Amar Rav Yochanan, Hakol modim shein osim ola rai b'tchila b'yom tov. Everyone agrees you're not allowed to place a temporary structure on Yom Tov, and certainly on Shabbos. What they're only arguing about is adding. They're only arguing about adding. Rav Eliezer Amar Emosifim b'Yom Tov. Rav Eliezer says you're not allowed to add to a building on Yom Tov. Ve'in tzarich lahem b'Shabbos. V'chacham Omer Mosifim b'Shabbos. You're allowed to add to a building on Shabbos. Ve'in tzarich lahem b'Yom Tov, and certainly on Yom Tov. In other words, the Gemara says there's no comparison between the case of the window where there is a structure and you're adding on to the structure. Okay, there's something already there and you're just adding onto it, as opposed to a case where now there's a missing wall and you're putting in a new wall. That's a whole different story. One is there's a hole in a wall, you're plugging the wall. Okay, there the Chum say you could plug the wall because you're adding to a structure that already exists and it's temporary. But to go ahead and create a whole new wall, whoa, the Chum never said that. And therefore, don't try to say that the way to reconcile these two brises, to say one is the Chacham and one is Rav Eliezer about this case of the window, The window case is about adding to a structure. Where now you guys, these two brises are talking about creating a structure because there is a missing wall, and therefore there's no comparison there. The Gemara has to therefore try to bring another possible source as to what they're arguing about between these two brises. El Lokasha 44a2, top of the second column, no contradiction. Hakar Rabbi Meir. One is Rabbi Meir. Okay, that's the one that permits placing the wall. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda, the others like Rabbi Yehuda. Why? The Tanya, asal vehema dofen l'sukkah. If a person uses an animal for a sukkah wall, Rabbi Meir posel. Rabbi Meir says it's not good because the animal may escape. Rabbi Yehuda machshir. Rabbi Yehuda says it's okay. It's a valid wall. Okay, so now we have a machlokes about, let's say you use an animal. Now, obviously we're talking like a large animal. A person has a pet rhinoceros, okay, and they basically want to go ahead and they use the rhinoceros as a wall of the sukkah. Rameir says, no, nothing doing, because the rhinoceros could easily walk away, could run away, and therefore it's not a good wall. Rehuda says, no, it's a good wall. Okay, fine. So now, what does that have to do with placing a temporary wall? So Rameir de kapasel hasam. Rameir says a wall made of an animal is not a good wall. Amalo mechitzahi. That means it's not a valid partition. So hachashari. So therefore, if your sukkah wall falls down and you want to place a rhinoceros, thank you, as a wall, then that's permitted. Why? Because halachically you're doing nothing. You're doing nothing. In other words, Rameir says it's an invalid wall, would say it's permitted to place it up as your sukkah wall because nothing's happening. You're not doing anything. Halachically, you didn't. Yes, it's true. You made a wall, but halachically, it's not. You didn't actually do anything of substance. Okay, you didn't accomplish anything. Rabbi Yehuda to come machshir hasam. Rabbi Yehuda says that an animal wall is valid. Al machitzahi. It's a valid partition. Hacha aser. Therefore, the brayso that says you're not allowed to use an animal as a wall is going Rabbi Yehuda because then you're actually doing something of substance. Right? So now the Gemara is basically pointing out, everyone would agree if you're doing something which has halachic ramifications, you would not be allowed to place that wall up. The question is over here, does this have halachic ramifications for this temporary wall? According to Rabbi Meir, it's not a valid wall, therefore it's permitted. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it is a valid wall, and therefore it's forbidden. Okay? Fine. V'tispra, the Gemara says, what are you talking about? When did Rabbi Meir say this? Behema. He only said this about an animal because the animal might right away. Did he say anything about people or utensils? In other words, Rabbi Meir's whole position is that animals are not going to listen to you, and therefore they're going to run away, and therefore it's not going to be valid. Utensils, you put utensils, right? But the brisa, the contradiction was not only between animal and animal. One brisa said animal, people, and utensils permitted. Other brisa says animal, people, and utensils forbidden. Right? So, granted, they're arguing about animals. They don't argue about utensils. Utensils don't run away. Rameir wouldn't invalidate utensils. Rameir also with people. If you tell the person, stay there, presumably they'll stay there, right? So, how are you extrapolating their arguments about animals and applying it broadly to this brayso, which talks about more than animals? Okay, Vasu, Rameir libademan. Who does Rameir go like when he says you're allowed to put up a temporary wall? If he goes like Rabbi Eliezer, who prohibits shuttering a wall, lahosif nami aser. Rabbi Eliezer even prohibits adding. So for sure, he would prohibit making a complete wall. Ella liba the Rabbanan. And maybe, so you want to say he's going like the Rabbanan, who said you're allowed to put up a temporary shutter. Eimer Damar Rabbanan. When did the Rabbanan say this? Lahosif, only to add. Lechatchil miyamar. They never said you're allowed to create a whole new structure. And therefore, don't try to connect Rameir and Rabbi Yehuda to this brisa. Rameir himself would not allow them. Rameir only would be talking about an animal, but he wouldn't be talking about all these other things, and therefore this can't be the explanation behind these brisas. So the Gemara now has to come up with a third possibility. Elahava ha-Rabbanan. Both brisas follow the opinion of the Rabbanan. V'kelim ha-kelim l'kasha. There's no question. Utensils in one brisa says permitted, one says it's forbidden. Why? Ha-bedofin shlishis, ha-bedofin revius. The distinction is, are we talking about the third wall of your sukkah or the fourth wall of your sukkah, right? Because if you're talking about a third wall, then what are you doing? You're making a halachic wall, right? If a sukkah has three walls, you're fine. So the brisa says the wall fell down, you built and you used animals or a person or kalim, and it's forbidden, is when you're building a wall that has halachic ramifications, the third wall. But if you're building the fourth wall, that's fine, because the fourth wall is just extra. It's not doing anything halachic. Daikanami, we could prove this. The brisa which forbade it said nafal dofna. It says that its wall fell down, implying that it's like a critical wall. So shma mina, okay, so that's a support to this. Fine, 44b1. So again, what's coming out over here is that a temporary wall can be set up as long as it doesn't have halachic ramifications. If it has halachic ramifications and seen as too substantial, and you're not allowed to put it up as a temporary wall. So Ella Adam Kasha. Okay, so we've reconciled when it came to people, utensils versus utensil. What about people and people? So where it says Adam, right? One brisa says people yes, the other brisa says people no. Adam nami lo kasha kan ladas kan shelo midas. The distinction is, if the person is aware that they're being used as a wall, then it's forbidden because that is seen as too much building-like. Okay, this is a very interesting distinction being made. If the person knows he's being acted, like, you could have a situation, if I say, hey guys, I'm playing a game, right? Could you guys all line up over here by ages, okay? And you guys line up, as you're lining up by ages, by sukkah wall, I say, I quickly eat my sukkah meal, boom, I was done, right? Now you all had no idea that you were acting as a wall, right? So theoretically, that's the case of shalom midas. You're there, but shalom midas. If it's midas, if you know what you're doing, that is too building-like. In other words, granted, it's a temporary wall, but at the end of the day, even if it's a fourth wall, you know what you're doing. A person is cognizant of the fact that they're building, and therefore, I know I'm standing here as a structure. Chazal forbade that case. When I know that I'm standing there to make a wall, Chazal forbade that case because it is too much like, I know what I'm doing, I know that I'm building, and therefore it's going to be aser. But a case where I'm just playing a game, I don't know, I'm just like, hey guys, can you stand here for a second? I want to talk to you, whatever it is, and you all stand there, make a partition, that would be okay. Okay? So kan l'dash, kan shalom midas, that's the distinction. The brisa which says it's forbidden is when they're aware. That's too building like. The one that says it's permitted is where the people are not aware, then they could be used as a partition. Okay? Ask the Gemara. Wait a second. Let's go back to the case this all started. We're talking about a case where Nehemiah is stuck, and we ask, hey guys, Nehemiah is stuck, come and make a partition. Presumably they're all knowledgeable about what's happening. The verse says, who says, Shlomi das Ava? The person who was orchestrating this did it in a way that they weren't aware. He said, hey, guys, let's dance. And he starts dancing around Nehemiah, right? So whatever, and they're dancing around Nehemiah. Nehemiah's stuck in the middle, and they don't realize they're making a partition, but now you have a wall of people all around it. Great. And now Nehemiah walks back in, asks the Gemara, Rav Chisda mi'aladasav, Rav Chisda, who is the organizer, he was aware. So the Gemara says, Rav Chisda Shlom Minyan Hava. Rav Chisda was not one of the people counted for the enclosure. In other words, Rav Chisda comes along, he says, hey, we got to save Nehemiah. So Rav Chisda says, hey guys, let's make a circle, whatever. He starts asking them to silly things. They make a circle, they don't realize they're making a partition. As long as they don't realize they're making a partition, then it would be permitted. Okay? So that's the end of this discussion. Let's just discuss some practical halachos over here. Any case where there is a wall that is going to have a halachic significance. So for example, let's say a person has, they're in a room with Sfarim, and you're not allowed to change a baby's diaper in a room with Sfarim. So what some people do if there's a baby in the room is they'll put they let's say people are sleeping in a room, they want to make sure that, there's a baby sleeping in the room, they're going to change the baby. So they'll put a curtain over the wall, over the Sfarim. That would be forbidden, because there you're going to basically, you're creating a domain which is going to have halachic ramifications, direct halachic ramifications, making it from like a holy place to a non-holy place, and the poskim therefore say, based on our discussion over here, that would be forbidden to create such a wall, right? Similarly, if your sukkah wall falls down, to go ahead and create a partition, a necessary sukkah wall, let's say your third wall falls down, you won't go ahead and put a curtain there, even for the day, it would be forbidden for that reason. Where if you want to just create a temporary wall as a partition, but without halachic ramifications. So, for example, let's say, back in the day when we used to rent out our social hall for kiddushes on Shabbos, thank God those days are behind us, but basically we used to sit in the corner, the Ner Tamid kiddush was in this 2x2 space, and everyone else in the other space, and they're having this delicious kiddush, and we're kichel and no herring and whatever it was, and basically they would put up a wall, they put up a mechitza, right, between us. There's no halachic ramifications on mechitza, it's temporary, so there the poskim would permit it. There is a discussion, which I didn't have a chance to really delve into. What about creating mechitza? Let's say you want to daven, right? So you want to daven, you want to set up a mechitza. Are you allowed to go ahead and set up a temporary mechitza wall? What are your thoughts based on what we discussed? It should be no. I saw Rav Shechter paskin that you're allowed to. I didn't have a chance to go into the sources as to why, or Rav Yosef also paskin you're allowed to. I'm not sure why, but it seems like they see it as an exception. I didn't catch why. Again, I didn't have a chance to find the actual source, but it seems like they permit that for some reason. But again, if it's a halachic wall, even if it's temporary, the answer is no. If it's a non-halachic wall, the answer is yes. What about the doorway I mentioned earlier? Let's say the door falls down, or a window falls. Let's say your window shade falls down on Shabbos, right? And you want privacy. It happens all the time. Well, whatever, sometimes. Person's window falls down, and now they want privacy. They want to put up a partition. There, the poskim say no. Even if you say, I'm going to take it down after Shabbos, but since it's something which would typically stay up for longer, you can't call that a temporary wall. Meaning, your subjective, me doing this for a temporary purpose, is not enough. It has to be something which is really, truly temporary, right? Using a human being as a temporary sukkah wall, that is temporary. They're not sticking around, right? That's for sure okay. But to go ahead and place a curtain over a door or over a window, where it's something where it's going to, there's more discussion by a door, because because that presumably, like, no one's going to leave a curtain over their front door for a very long time. So there's more machlokas, better not to. But over a window, everyone would agree, if your window shades fall down, to go ahead and place a curtain there. That would not it's halachically you're not doing anything. It's just that it doesn't fall in the category of temporary because of the fact that it's something which presumably many people would end up leaving there for a while. Okay? Have a great day.